being interested. I'm Laura Hardiman. We'll introduce ourselves as we go around. But you know everybody, maybe. Maybe. Okay. We're going to start with the first question, and
We need to everybody.
introduce yourself. Okay.
David Howard.
Hi, Miss Lisa. I'm Vicki Kirkman.
Hello, I'm Kevin Weisman.
Laurie Fowler.
I'm Roderick Shepard, principal at Florence High School.
I'm Lan Heiss, Assistant Superintendent.
Hi, I'm Connie Wallace, Assistant Superintendent and Chief School Finance Officer.
And I'm Jimmy Shaw, superintendent. And we are glad to have you with us today.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm Laura Hardiman, William's grandmother. So that's my claim to fame. Okay. Shall we start?
So, Ms. Guzman, can you first introduce yourself? Like tell us your name, and let's make sure we have the pronunciation correct.
Sure, my name is Lisa Guzman. I normally go by Lisa Guzman, which is much easier. I'm currently the accountant at Florence City Schools, and I've been here 12 and a half years.
Awesome.
Okay, thank you.
So you've been through the first part of our interview, which is our performance piece. You had 45 minutes in order to be able to do so. Now what you will do is you will go through a round robin, 11 questions. We'll start with Mrs. Hardiman. In front of you, you should have the questions. And what we're going to do is give you 5 minutes to go through the questions, to make whatever notes that you'd like to make. And then we'll start the interview after that. Mrs. Wallace will be our timekeeper. She'll give you a 1-minute warning. And after that 1-minute warning, Mrs. Hardiman will start with the first question. All right? So.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw.
You may begin. Make whatever notes you like for 5 minutes.
These are the same tasks that I did earlier?
That should be the questions.
I just have the tasks that I did
You
earlier.
have a task? Okay.
Thank you.
What are we waiting on?
The 5 minutes for the
Oh, okay.
while she looks over the questions. While she looks over the questions.
Questions, yeah. Okay. We have to fill out these, don't we, school?
I'll take care of it.
You have 1 minute remaining.
Ms. Guzman, it's time. All right, Ms. Hardiman.
Briefly describe your knowledge of the public education finances in K through 12 at the state and federal level. Specifically, tell us your knowledge of the state foundation program funding for Alabama's public schools.
Well, public education finances for the state and federal level, there are many different rules and allocations and different areas that you need to know, different uses that they have to have. They have different expectations for the end of the year as far as carryover. As far as the state foundation program, that I've learned through our ASBO classes, and the average 20 days, they take an average of the 20 days after Labor Day of our enrollment, and they use that average to do a snapshot. And that is our ADM for the following year, not the current year. And then those divisors, can I take this off? Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
The divisors are used by grade level, and that helps the state determine our teacher units that we would receive. And then they give us that information along with how much they would allocate towards us, and then our local area has to give a 10 mil match, and we add to that pot of money to use to take care of all of our finances for the year.
Lisa, can I call you Lisa?
Yes, please.
Okay. In your role as CSFO, you will be interacting with board members, superintendent, outside organizations, and school personnel. Describe your experience in this area and tell how you would communicate problems or issues related to the financial operations of the district to the superintendent or the board.
I've actually had a lot of experience with all the different members, the board members, the superintendent, outside organizations, and school personnel. I've had several different jobs here at Florence City Schools, and each of those jobs I worked in different capacity with different stakeholders. Most of my experience, I've learned just to be open and honest. My best quality is that I'm a good listener. Anytime I've had an aggravated parent or student or teacher or community member, just to listen to their perspective. Sometimes it's just a miscommunication, but sometimes they might be looking for something different than you initially think. As long as you talk through it and work with them, we have so many resources here in Florence, so many parents and ASBO members and community members that see all different aspects that I think as long as you communicate with everyone, you're very good to go.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lisa. My question to you is, will you briefly outline the process you would follow to prepare a comprehensive system-wide budget? Please include local, state, and federal funds.
The beginning of the process is to meet with each of the principals at all the schools and all of the directors and find out what needs and wants they have for their location. Once we go through that information, we would use their current employee list to give us a baseline of where we're at each location, and we would make adjustments depending on our enrollment, maybe adding a teacher if needed or subtracting one, adding personnel as needed in different locations. And then we would use the Budget Works program in NextGen to go ahead and figure out what all those salaries might be. It gives us a good estimate. It estimates their salaries plus all their benefits for each location, as well as the state funds and the federal funds. And then we finalize everything and make sure the end result looks good and make sure that we compare it to our state revenues and our expenses from last year to make sure that we come up with a good final picture.
Oh, ma'am, I got question number 4. So describe how you would monitor and budget financial question operations on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis. Also describe how you would take that information and keep the board and superintendent informed of all financial conditions of the district.
Well, on a daily basis, I would be signing purchase orders, and that gives you a day-to-day visual of the different invoices that are coming through and the expenses that the district has. On the monthly basis, I'm currently putting together the board reports for the board meetings and looking at all those financials and verifying the percentages, looking at where we were last year at the same month and comparing any differentials. On a quarterly basis, we do the same types of monthly reports just on a quarterly fashion and make sure that everything is in line. And if we see any discrepancies, we research it and find out what the difference is and if it was a coding error or a mistake, if there's something we could correct. And on the annual basis, that would be when we're closing out the fiscal year. We look at our expenses and we can make adjustments as needed to make sure we zero out each of the funds that we're required to by law.
All right, Ms. Guzman. Question number 5. What is your greatest professional achievement and disappointment? What did you learn from both?
My greatest professional achievement would be having a job for 12 and a half years. I'm originally from Miami, and it's a very different place. Generally, you just look to the next job and keep moving up and continue on that route. And I did that when I lived there till I was 34 years old. And my sister actually moved to Florence, Alabama, which we had never heard of. And my parents said, we're going to go help her. And we actually had our home for sale. We were going to look to buy a bigger home in Florida. But the crime and community was getting a little more different from how I grew up in it. And we thought, okay, we'll go visit Florence, Alabama and just see what it's like. One trip, and we loved it. It was the greatest thing. And even since I've been here, there's been times where you get frustrated or, aggravated with your job or the way things are going, but I love these people in this community. Our employees are my family and friends, and it's nice to be able to say I've been somewhere for 12 and a half years and I still love my job. The disappointment one, that hurts. Okay, that's easy. When I was at Florence High School, I was the bookkeeper there. And not only the bookkeeper, but I also assisted the secretary at times and the attendance clerk, like when they went to lunch. I had a deposit at the time in like a little money bag, and I put it under my arm, and I was headed to the bank to make my deposit. And the secretary out front was slammed. There were people out front, there were parents at the counter, students waiting, the phone was ringing off the hook. And as I passed through the office, I thought, there's no way I cannot stop and help her. So I stopped and I answered the phone, and in the process, I inadvertently dropped the money bag from under my arm, which I didn't know at the time until a couple days later, after you have a couple sleep cycles and remember, the money bag had fallen underneath the desk. But I remember coming back from my car thinking, what did I do? I looked everywhere. I was in a panic, and I just had to call the principal, and the current CSFO was Ken Davis at the time, and tell him, I messed up. I don't know what happened. If you have to fire me, I understand. It was my mistake. I will pay it back. I was just crushed. And they said, no, you're not paying it back. We'll look for it, which I don't think we ever did find it, which was heartbreaking. But I was kind of in a cloud for several weeks that I was just so angry with myself and so disappointed. And there was an administrator that stopped me in the hall one day and said, you really need to forgive yourself. That you need to let it go. It was a mistake, and you still do a great job for us. And that was a turning point because I had really been crushed by something that I had done. But now I see that it's a great teaching method for the other employees that I'm training. They'll come in my office and say, I made this terrible mistake. Oh my gosh, will I get fired? And I can relate to them and say, okay, this is what I did. And it was horrible, but nobody died, and we got past it, and we can make corrections. So I learned a lot from both, definitely.
Guzman, what specific experiences have you had that have prepared you to successful key school financial officer for
I think that's kind of twofold. One, I would say the different positions that I've had in my 12 and a half years, and also the training that I received from ASBO and my college training at UNA as well. I do currently have an MBA in accounting from UNA, and I also have a master's in education and business and marketing. I'm a certified business and marketing teacher. A lot of people don't know, but I was actually offered the job as a business teacher at Florence Middle School, and I was so excited to take it. But as I've gotten older, I kind of listened to that gut feeling that I could stay and all my coworkers needed me in the business office, or I could go on a different venture. So I decided to stay in the business office, which I love everyone there. As far as ASBO training, they have conferences twice a year actually, where you can go and learn all kinds of different information from all different systems across the state. And there's just a wealth of knowledge. I love attending the classes, and no matter how many times you go, you always learn something new. As far as my different positions, I started out part-time as the CNP secretary bookkeeper, and then I went to the high school as the summer school secretary. After that, I was the Florence High School guidance clerk, and then I became the high school bookkeeper. And then I went to the business office and was the secretary bookkeeper for the business office. Then I worked with Miss Addison for about 3 years in payroll, and when she retired, I took her job as a payroll officer. And then our accountant left to go be a CSFO at another system, and I was able to move into that position. So I feel like I've definitely had a lot of different experiences, and I've got to work with so many different employees that I do have a good grand picture of all the different aspects of the system.
Thank you.
Discuss your knowledge and/or skills regarding the various software programs and technology resources that you would utilize in the role of CSFO.
Our financial software is the next-gen software with Harris Computers, and I have been utilizing that in all my different positions for the past 12 and a half years. Being a business education teacher, I love computers. I love teaching computers. I'm thrilled to assist all the bookkeepers in any of their questions, and if I don't know the answer, I'm happy to contact Harris Computers and find out the answer. Anything that we can do to make it easier for our bookkeepers or teachers, I definitely love that. We use Excel a lot of the times. I was lucky enough when I worked for a controller back in South Florida, he taught me everything about Excel, and there's still so much to learn, but I have a good knowledge in Excel. And as the accountant, I've been able to use the AIM portal for the State Department, and I process our monthly files through the AIM portal in the State Department each month to see what type of edits we have, if any, and we get those corrected and process them through to the state.
Describe your experience in assisting with and/or performing a year-end close, including the preparation of the annual financial statements.
For the year-end close, we have to look at all the accounts. Depending, some of the buckets, you have to return money if it wasn't used. Some of the money you can roll over to another year. Each one has its own attributes, and we look at each of those accounts and see where we are. Sometimes one account might overspend and another might underspend, and you might be able to transfer the funds to zero out the accounts, but at the end of the year, they do all need to be zeroed out, and then when we process the file through to the State Department, it can't have any critical errors. And they have business codes and regulations that come back on the computer system to let you know if you have any errors. And as long as we get those all through, usually the state will process us through and finalize our financial statements.
Ms. Guzman, describe your knowledge of the Alabama bid law to us.
The Alabama state bid law is $15,000. That is the threshold where if you are going to purchase a product or supplies, if you're going to spend $15,000, the state wants you to use those taxpayers' dollars wisely. They want you to put it out publicly as a bid and post it in the public for all available vendors to give you the lowest bid. Now, there is a caveat that it does have to be a reasonable vendor. It can't be anything too far-fetched, but you want to give everyone an equal opportunity and use your tax dollars to your wisest ability.
Suppose the board or superintendent disagree with the practice that you believe to be financially sound. How would you address the situation?
I would definitely talk it through. There's always another version. Everything in accounting, when I first started, I thought was black and white, and it's all different shades of gray. If there's something that someone's uncomfortable with, we could talk about it. I could find accounting evidence on the internet. You can find all kinds of information through the ASBA organization or for other CSFOs in our area that you can talk to and ask questions and just work it out between the two until you find a happy compromise that everyone's comfortable with.
Lisa, we have other finalists for this position. Why should you be selected as a CSFO for Florence City Schools?
I think my three main points would be my knowledge, my experience, and my heart. As far as the knowledge base, I've had a lot of education in accounting and finance, and I've learned a vast amount of things that pertain to that. My experience, I did not plan on having 7 or 8 different jobs here at Florence City Schools, but they asked me to go somewhere else, and I love learning, so I was happy to move and learn something new. And I have to say, honestly, my heart is just here. There have been other CSFO positions that have come open, and I've discussed it with my friends and family, and my children go to school here. My husband is an employee here. We're not leaving Florence, Alabama, so I do know that even if this were not to work out for some reason, I love my job, and I love my friends and my family, and I'm staying here no matter what.
Thank you.
What would you ask us? You have questions?
What would be the main thing that you're looking for in a CSFO for Florence City Schools?
Yeah, good question. I'm looking for someone that has experience and knowledge. Transparency.
I think experience, knowledge, somebody that socially and personality-wise fits in, somebody that gets along with the people they work with, and people that are just glad to be here.
Principals?
It's going to sound crazy coming from a principal, but I'd like to have somebody that's going to be able to say no and know how to wisely be able to distribute the funds that we have available in our district.
And I think one of the questions was regarding the how you would handle it if something that you believed in was against something that somebody else said, and the compromise, I guess, that you mentioned about, but at the same time being able to present your point, if that was what was valid. Mm-hmm. And I think that's kind of like what Mr. Shepherd is saying, that sometimes you may have to say no to a situation, but
yeah, when it comes to money, you definitely need to be careful. There are certain rules that are definitely black and white and that you cannot alter. And I think it was one of the ASBO webinars that I just recently watched. A CSFO put a slide up that I actually printed out, and it said that your number 1 job is to not go to jail. Your number 2 job is to not let any of your fellow employees go to jail. And then the third thing was to enjoy your job and take care of your friends and family. And I thought, that's really good, because that's the order. Your utmost priority is to make sure that nobody goes to jail and no one gets in trouble, and you don't end up on a newspaper for anything bad.
We're not in the newspaper.
I think it's just very important that our finances are kept safe and they're kept secure, but the reason for that just being the priority of our students, that every decision that's made that comes out of that office is remembering that we are here for one reason, and that's to take care of our children and to support our teachers, which builds our community. So the weight of this position is great in my mind, just because every child in this district depends on the decisions that are made in that financial office for those to be a priority of our children being first.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I would echo that same thing.
I guess for me, of course, just the same type scenario that they're talking about, just making sure that, we're providing all the support to the children, support to the faculty, while also maintaining a good fund balance to keep our district, where it's a top-notch district and that we're just providing everything for our kids while still maintaining that, that balance. You can get to a point where you're providing so much and not watching your fund balance. You have to sometimes, as Dr. Shepherd said, you have to be able to say no and watch that. You also have to make sure that the facilities, that, the schools are maintained, because you can let those slide a lot of times, and then it'll get in a bad shape in a hurry if you don't, maintain those on a permanent balance. Or
Definitely.
For me, I'll echo something, everybody says something I believe in. Number one, you're right. Like, I don't want to go to jail. And I don't want to be in a paper about some mistake that's made because we've entrusted our finances to you. Dr. Heiss is absolutely correct in that we have the finances that we have because we're trying to educate students. And so the finances are a means to an ends. But also, I want somebody to understand this is not a 9-to-5. And people talk about work-life balance. I'm telling you, this is a tough job. All of us have tough jobs from the ground level all the way up. And it costs you to do this job. But it is, just understand, it is a career undertaking. It is not a job. So,
Very true.
yeah.
Thank you so much for your interest and your answers. They've been very informative for me. And we'll see what happens.
Does anyone have any other questions for me?
Ms. Guzman.
Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you
Appreciate
very
it.
much.
Yeah, someone will contact you. One of the board members will contact you at some point in this process. We appreciate you coming. I hope you have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
Lisa.
I have one announcement to make. Our second candidate, Mr. Peters, has just emailed me, and I've sent an email to all of you to show you that he has decided at the last minute to drop out of the interview process. So our third candidate, Mr. Hodge, is not scheduled to begin until his verbal interview until 6 o'clock. But if he arrives early, we will push that up and let him begin early. So at this time, we're probably going to have at least an hour hiatus.
We could interview Lisa again.
Thank you again, Ms. Guzman.
Thank you so much.
this is intimidating.
Not us, not us. Well, greetings, Mr. Hodge. Welcome to Florence, Alabama.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm Laura Hardiman, and we're going to go around and introduce ourselves.
I'm David Howard.
I'm Vicki Kirkman. Nice to see you.
I'm Kevin Weisman, principal at Florence Middle School.
Laurie Fowler, principal at Forest Hills Elementary.
I'm Roderick Shepard, principal at Florence High School.
I'm Leanne Heiss, I'm Assistant Superintendent.
Hi, I'm Connie Wallace, Assistant Superintendent and Chief School Finance Officer.
Jimmy Shaw, Superintendent.
Okay. You've had has he had the questions?
No, he's not. So Mr. Hodge just finished his 45-minute performance task. We have his flash drive. We will share that information with you. Before we get into looking at your questions, Mr. Hodge, we do want to give you a few minutes to introduce yourself to us on the board and tell us a little bit about yourself before we move on.
Okay, well, my name is Craig Hodge. Can I take my mask off?
Yes, you're free to take your mask off.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you so much.
Yes.
Hard to breathe in that thing.
Please.
My name is Craig Hodge. I am originally from Mississippi, moved over here a long time ago and went to high school in Thomasville, Alabama, where I played football and baseball, and we were very successful. Actually, two of my championship games were in this area, one in Killen and one at West Limestone High School. So that I was familiar with the area a little bit from that. Went on to play college football and earned my accounting degree while I went to Mississippi College, who was a division rival with North Alabama, so also played North Alabama a couple of times, and I think I told Dr. Shaw that when he called. Pardon me. But I actually married my high school sweetheart, and we have three kids, three boys, one of which is now a middle school teacher in Thomasville, and one is a senior at Alabama who is looking at law school, which I hope he's very successful with so he can pick my nursing home one day. The other one, the last one, is a senior at Hillcrest High School in Tuscaloosa. So we're almost empty nesters, and so I've been looking for an opportunity to go to a place that I can retire and be very happy with. So that's when I kind of started looking around a little bit, because we're on our final stretch with the one in high school, and it really doesn't matter where we live at that point. But I've been in state government finance for a little over 25 years now. I started out with the highway department, building highways. Then I switched over to feeding kids I was an auditor for the State Department with the Child Nutrition Program for 13 years. Really loved that because it did give me an opportunity to go around to all the systems in the state and kind of see how things work in different systems, and it's kind of a snapshot. Each system is totally different, and so I think that experience of seeing all the different systems around the state actually helped me to say, hey, there's more than one way to skin a cat, so to speak. Pardon me. Then I got the opportunity to go kind of back home and became the child nutrition director at Clark County Schools, and did that for about 4 years, and under some pressure from some of my friends at the State Department said, hey, we need some good CSFOs out there, why don't you apply? And I did, and so I was at Scottsboro for a couple of years, and I'm currently at Hale County down in Greensboro, Alabama. So that's kind of my career as we go, and like I said, I've been married for 27 years, and that's where I am family-wise.
Okay. Mr. Hodge, you have some questions in front of you.
Sure.
And so Mrs. Wallace will be our timekeeper here. We will give you 5 minutes to make any notes on those questions in which you'd like. At the 4-minute mark, she will give you a 1-minute warning. At the conclusion of that, Mrs. Hardiman will ask you your very first question. It'll be a round-robin style interview. Each of us will ask you a question. So approximately about 60 minutes for the 11 questions.
Okay, may I ask a question on the assessment?
Yes, sir.
Are there going to be questions about the assessment?
No, sir. So we will take the assessment, and that information will be provided to the board. This 60 minutes we have will be strictly about the 11 questions.
Okay.
All right, so are you ready to begin?
You have 1 minute.
Mrs. Harder?
Mr. Hodge, briefly describe your knowledge of public education finances K through 12 at the state and federal levels. Specifically, tell us your knowledge of the state foundation program funding for the Alabama public schools.
All right. Foundation program is what everything is the foundation for our all of our allocations. There's a nice formula that Ethan Taylor at the State Department comes up with based on our ADM and related to how many children in each grade group, and a funding is based on that. The foundation program also accounts for state nurses and technology coordinator and some other funds, but the main fund is our foundation program. Part of what is required for a system to participate in the foundation program to get that is a 10 mil match of our ad valorem taxes. So there is that aspect as well. I have been involved with the state finance side of it for a very long time now, so it's kind of hard to narrow down sometimes what exactly is my knowledge of it, but it does, the funding is based on that ADM and teacher units that we get. And I understand you guys have quite a few local units, which is an investment from the local dollars to provide for extra teachers that are not included in the foundation program. Another thing about the foundation program with that formula, there is also a difference based on the degree type and experience that each of your staff has, so that actually increases in your foundation funding. As far as the federal level, that's all controlled also a lot from that ADM report as far as what the allocations are for each different program, and that federal funding is under the control of an OMB circular that pretty much all the federal programs fall under, is how we have to handle that, as what's allowable and what's unallowable. But that also has to do with a lot with ADM and the type of students that we have.
Mr. Hodge, in your role as CSFO, you will be interacting with board members, superintendent, outside organizations, and school personnel. Describe your experience in this area and tell how you would communicate problems or issues related to the financial operations of the district to the superintendent and the board.
First of all, with my experience, I have presented two financial statements to the board at both Scottsboro and at Hale County every month. Fortunately, we haven't had that many adverse things until the COVID pandemic hit, so I had to present to the board what the potential drawbacks from that is, or the adverse things that come from that. One of my other experiences that helped me communicate with folks is in an adverse way is when I did audits for the child nutrition program. Very often I had to present bad findings that cost money to school systems and individuals, both to the superintendent and to other individuals, and then also some public agencies as well. So I always felt good that most of the time I was able to tell them, hey, you owe us X number of dollars, and most of the time they were, thank you for pointing out those errors, and we'll correct those in the future, is kind of how I went about it. On a kind of a side note with communications, I also, as a kind of a side job, did play-by-play for a lot of radio things. So as far as communications, I feel like I have pretty good verbal skills, although it may not be this is maybe not a good example of that. But in order to present in front of a crowd, also I have presented at ASBO as one of the speakers there as well. It's been a little while since I've done that, but I also have a minor in communications, which kind of helps me with those things if I can draw back on those experiences.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hodge. My question is, could you briefly outline the process you would follow to prepare a comprehensive system-wide budget? Please include local, state, and federal funds.
All right. The budgeting process is very similar in each fund anyway. The first thing you look at what I look at is past performance, what we've done in the past, what is the economic forecast for each of those programs and an economic forecast in general. Excuse me. The second thing you really need, which is about 80 to 85% of your budget in the school system, is your personnel. So you look at personnel projections. What are your needs personnel-wise? Once you get that figured out, then, like I said, it's about 15 to 20% left in your budget. You of course, in this whole process, you're meeting with the superintendent, you're meeting with the directors and program leaders to understand what their needs are, and you try to accommodate those needs. But you do have to follow the guidelines and make sure those guidelines are met as far as what's allowable, what's unallowable, and that kind of thing. So really like I said, go through past performance, look at personnel, and look at what your department heads' needs are, and then go from there. And that's where your basis of your budget comes from.
Thank you.
Hey, Ms. Hodge. All right, describe how you would monitor the budget and financial operations on a monthly, quarterly, or annual basis. Also describe how you would take that information and keep the board and superintendent informed of the financial conditions of the district.
All right. Again, that's presenting financial statements to the board, usually maybe a summary of what's going on, what our 1 month operating budget is. Make sure that we're growing that, if that is our goal, to grow that 1 month operating budget. Also, to meet at least monthly with each department head to discuss their budgets and go through, hey, making sure that we're on the right path. I think if you fail to do that, you end up at the end of the year scrambling around saying, hey, where did this money go? Or, hey, you need to spend a little bit more in this to make sure that we expend all the finances that we need to, or the funds that we need to do. So mainly the monthly meetings with director head, department heads to make sure that we're on the right path. And the second thing, of course, which kind of sounds weird to say that the board and the superintendent are kind of second, but you find out your basic information and then go forth and present that to the superintendent and to the board. I would also like to have an open communication both ways. If there's any questions that come up in between, hey, let's go ahead and take care of it now and get us on the right path. So monthly meetings are really and the communication is really the key to that.
All right, Mr. Hodge, what is your greatest professional achievement and disappointment? What did you learn from both?
This is probably the hardest question on this sheet, I think, because I had to sit and think about it a little while longer than any of the other questions. And matter of fact, I'm still kind of thinking about it as we go. I think I was most pleased with when I was actually a child nutrition director. I was able to write a grant for breakfast in the classroom and got that passed, and earned about $250,000 for a small district to provide equipment and things that we really needed and for our cafeterias. That was also sort of a disappointment in a way in how to get folks on board with you. I really thought some of the people that were kind of negative about it would have been positive, and I was disappointed in that. And I learned a lot about planting seeds for different programs, not just pushing hard to get it done, but slowly plant seeds in people to have them understand what the goal is. And so I think that process of writing that grant, getting it approved, and then putting it into practice, I learned a lot about how to deal better with people, and I'm still learning that. So that's a good thing. But I think that's probably both the answer to both achievement and disappointment in a way.
Mr. Hodge, what specific experiences do you feel have prepared you for success to become the chief school financial officer in the District of Florence City?
Well, experience. I think experience has helped me through the years to learn things, just like what I alluded to in the last question is I think you go through each day of your life learning new things every day. And as I get to the end of my career, so to speak, I have 25 years in now, I have learned a lot of different things. One of the things I think I alluded to earlier as well is being able to see different systems and how each system operates. And maybe sometimes it's better to look from outside in rather than the inside, because that's what you know. You know, if you've been in the same system for your whole career, you don't know what it's like in another place that may not have the funding that you have, or may not have the caliber of people that you guys have. So seeing different perspectives can help see it see Florence City from the outside in, I think is a better way to look at it sometimes.
Thank you.
Discuss your knowledge and/or skills regarding various software programs and technology resources that you would utilize in your role of CSFO.
Currently, everybody in the state uses NextGen, and I've used that software for quite a few years now. And I will say I don't pretend to know every little thing about it, because there's little caveats that if you check the wrong box, you get a whole different answer sometimes. But again, you learn things every day. That is the program that we use to budget and use to our everyday accounting, doing purchase orders and whatnot. A couple of the other systems I've worked with, we used ASOP and Frontline to get our subs and our timekeeping system at Scottsboro. And we actually just started a new timekeeping system at Hale County, and I can't for the life of me remember what the name of it is right now. But we, I think everybody in the state now is working on learning Schoology and how that works. Thankfully, that's an instruction thing and not a finance thing, so I've kind of pushed that aside. In my previous system, we used a lot of Google software, Google Drive, Google Docs, and that kind of thing to get information around. I guess I'm a little old school too. Microsoft Office products is what I'm used to. Matter of fact, when I answered the questions, I actually used Excel to answer the question because it helps me calculate things a little bit better. I used to say I can make an Excel spreadsheet, sing, dance, do whatever you want to. I have actually, a long time ago, used to use Excel to write letters, to have my format letter. I mean, I'm so used to that particular program. There's a couple of new things that are coming along. It seems like every 5 years the enrollment program changes. We're on Power School now. I think when I first started it was STI, now, Chalkable, and now we're at Power School. And there are some systems that are trying to change their accounting software over to the Power School system, which I'm kind of leery of changing in the middle until they get it right. But that is I'm of the opinion that technology is a great thing, and we need more technology in our life in a way, but we don't need to get where the personal things don't happen. But I'm always willing to try and learn new software, and I'm not afraid of doing that. When I was a kid, and I think in the 9th grade, we had those Apple IIe computers, and when we got those, I was teaching the teacher how to use that because I had already had a PC for a few years before they actually came to school. So I guess I am a child of the 80s and 90s there, where I learned how to do a lot of things and saw the change in computers as we go. And they're not as intimidating to me as they are to some folks.
Thank you.
Describe your experience in assisting with and/or performing a year-end close, including the preparation of the annual financial statements.
Well, this is my 4th time doing it this particular year, which I'm currently working on closing out for Hale County. I always try to look at the small funds first and go through them to make sure that we've spent the required money and make sure those are taken care of, state funds first. And then thankfully we can carry over a lot of federal funds this year, which is a good thing. But I've gone through this about 4 times now, and this last audit that happened of my financials for Hale County was a no findings report, which I'm so thankful of, and that was through the examiners of public accounts. The county systems have have the examiners come in and do. So I feel very confident that I can do that well. But it does require a lot of help from bookkeepers, and again, that's communication between the department heads and the bookkeepers to make sure that all the purchase orders are closed, all the things that need to happen, and just keep monitoring those situations.
Describe your knowledge of Alabama State law, please.
Oh, that's a good one too. I enjoy this one because I had to audit the bid system or the bid law for when I was at Child Nutrition for the longest time, and it changes. It's a fluid thing. Thankfully, we've gone to a micro purchase and a small purchase method for anything below $15,000. And that's where the state bid law actually has a cutoff point. Federally, it's like $250,000, which we will probably never reach that. So if we were under the federal guidelines, we would actually probably not have to bid anything at all, which would be kind of interesting. But currently, we do have the $15,000 limit. Anything that you purchase on aggregate needs to be bid at that point, whether it's a good or services. Now, when you're talking about public works, you're getting into over $50,000, and it has to do with real property, improving property, and that kind of thing. That falls under the public works law there. So as I was a child nutrition director, I had to write the specs for several bids. We actually built a new school, and I built a new cafeteria and had to spec out all the equipment for that cafeteria. And this was, say, 8 years ago, and stainless steel probably has not gone down in price. So that's expensive stuff. But to follow the bid law, you had to do all those things to make sure that you were crossing the T's, dotting the I's on everything, and making sure you're getting what you're bidding, and which I think sometimes is an issue with small systems in particular, because there's not a purchasing agent or to kind of keep track of all the things that need to happen for bid law. In a perfect world, you need to have know that you want to buy something 3 to 4 months in advance so that you can go through the process and properly bid it. And I think most of us are, when we decide to buy things, we're like, we want it now kind of thing, which becomes a good bit of an issue. Now, we also have a lot of statewide purchasing agreements with ALJP and some other purchasing cooperatives that have already bid most of these products out, so that's a good thing as well. But still, if you want to make sure you get exactly what you want, the best thing to do is go ahead and bid and do your own bid for those things.
Suppose the board or superintendent disagrees with the practice you feel. My microphone on. Suppose the board or superintendent disagree with the practice that you believe to be financially sound. How would you address the situation?
Communication, again, is the key. I think going through every foreseeable timeline, if you will. If we did this, maybe this will happen. If we did this, this will happen, and try to point out the potential risks of continuing doing what we're doing or changing to do something different. I think you have to examine the potential risk for anything, communicate those well, and then if it's if it's not against any laws or against any policies, if you will, regulations, it's the superintendent and the board's decision to make on that. We just have to follow along and try to cope with it, if you will. But again, I think to point out the potential risks and make sure that everyone is aware of those risks before we do change to a potential bad situation.
Thank you.
Mr. Hodge, we have other finalists for this position. Why should you be selected as the CSFO for Florence City Schools?
Well, two things I think kind of answer that question is I do have a good bit of experience now, which and again, every day is a learning day. My dad taught me one time, he said, if you get a chance for an interview, make every effort to take advantage of that interview because you learn about yourself during an interview. So I'm learning today with this experience. So the first answer is experience. I have a lot of experience, 25 years under my belt with governmental accounting and finance. The other thing is, I think, looking at it from an outside-in point of view. I can look at it from an auditor standpoint. When I come in, I can look and see, hey, this is how things are going. Let's look at it and say, why are we doing this practice? Or why are we doing that? Just to, not necessarily to change anything, but just to investigate and make sure that we're doing the right thing. And I think I answered before, is if you're within the system doing those things, sometimes you kind of say, well, this is the way we've always done it, and that's not always the correct answer. Most of the time it is, because there's a good reason for doing it that way. But however, looking at things with fresh eyes.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Is there anything you would like to ask us?
I drove around town for a bit, and I learned a lot about Florence just driving around, because I thought it was going to take me a lot longer to get here than it did. So I've found, Florence is a fairly large city. I didn't realize how large it was until I drove around a bit and got lost, and thankfully GPS helped me out. But I think Florence, the Shoals area, is a beautiful area to stay. Wonderful place to raise kids. I actually have, my wife actually has some family that live in the Shoals area, and they seem to love it and brag about it all the time. And this is, you guys have a beautiful place to live and work, and I'd like to be a part of it if I can. It's, again, a beautiful place. The times I have been here was as an adversary, playing football and baseball and whatnot, and I still enjoyed it then. So I was actually able to come, the last Division II opponent that North Alabama had was my old school, Mississippi College, and one of my old coaches was still coaching then, bless his heart, he's retired now. And I was able to come and watch that. So that was my last visit to Florence, actually, and enjoyed it. Enjoyed the people. The people treated everybody right, and it was just a good experience.
Okay, thank you.
Is anybody?
Mr. Hodge, we thank you for coming and interviewing with us, and we will have you safe travels back, and someone from the board will be contacting you in the next few weeks.
In the next few, I'm sorry.
Weeks.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it.